Hey guys, we will die. The question is when? In 80 years, 20 years, maybe tomorrow. And if you don't currently live in La Crosse, Wisconsin, death might not be a topic of daily conversation. And it might be a little uncomfortable or kind of scary to talk about. But I don't think it has to be that way. I think the more we talk about it and the more we think about death, I think the less foreign and less scary it feels, especially when the time comes. So the point of this video is me sharing my views on death and hopefully making it a little easier to think about what it means to you. And you may be wondering, why is a healthy 26-year-old talking to me about death? Very fair point. I want to reiterate, this is just me sharing my perspectives. Someone who's, say, a war veteran, a cancer survivor, physician who's practiced for over half a century. These people have way more authority than I may ever have. What I do have are honest ears, and I have listened to the wisdom of many such people. And their perspectives have influenced mine, so I'm hoping I can give you some food for thought at least. So let me start by sharing you how my perspective of death has evolved over time. I remember as a kid being absolutely terrified of the concept of death. As soon as I was capable of logical thinking, maybe like age 7. I remember often having trouble going to sleep at night. I'd look up at the dimly lit ceiling and think to myself, what if I stopped breathing while I was sleeping? What if I closed my eyes and never saw light ever again? What happens after death? So I would bring the blanket over my head so I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed, and that's how I went to sleep. And shortly after that, I came across this concept called religions, and I was so fascinated. I was like, oh wow, you are going to heaven after death? Oh, you're going to be reincarnated after death? Oh, you're going to join the one being after death? That's so cool. And then I jumped to the conclusion that religions must have existed to provide people a sense of control over things they didn't know, like what happens after death. So at 15, for my sophomore English class, I wrote a 3-page paper titled Science versus Religion. I came up with this model back then, which was basically a Venn diagram. But then there were like 2 rings that were interlaced. So as science expanded, religion would continue to have its own space. And the reason I explained was that mankind will always ask questions that no matter how big science expands, it's not going to be able to answer, like questions of what happens after death. And my teacher took off 10 points from the essay because she thought I plagiarized, but I'm proud of that. And around then was when I started reflective journaling, which I've continued to this day. And that's helped me think critically through my own biases and lens through which I perceive concepts. And over time, it's helped me realize that science and religion is not as binary as I used to think it was. So in college, I remember in my empty, small, minimalist room, there was one sheet of paper that was stuck on the wall, and it was a black and white printout of Bruce Lee. And as much as I love his 2-finger push-ups and 1-inch punches, the reason I taped it there was for his philosophy on the art of dying, to accept the way to lose, to accept defeat. To learn to die is to be liberated by it. I graduated from college, but then I joined Peace Corps, left the country, and in the house that I lived in for 2 years in rural Mozambique, I painted a quote by Gandhi: "Live as if you were to die tomorrow, learn as if you were to live forever." And that and Bruce Lee's philosophy I'd meditated on for many, many years, trying to figure out, how do I really accept death? And how do I truly live as if I were to die tomorrow? And originally I used to think that assuming that I'm gonna die tomorrow meant that I should be like doing crazy things today that I might regret not doing. Over time, I've come to believe that it's more about really honest reflection in what I seek and what I already have in life, and recognizing that, oh, everything I wanted is already inside me. I think that is how I would answer how would I live as if I were to die tomorrow, is to really meditate and reflect on what I already have, so that I wouldn't have to live in any different way today than yesterday and still be satisfied with dying tomorrow. The main purpose of painting that quote was really not for myself, but when my students would walk by, because I lived right next to the school, they'd ask, "Teacher, what does that mean?" I get to say, "Oh, if you do your English homework, maybe you'll be able to read this by the end of the year." And 2 of the students were actually able to read it. Now it's been a year and a half now in medical school, and I come across the topic of death very frequently through autopsies or through terminally ill patients or suicidal patients, and I get to have very deep conversations, a lot about death. I like to ask, are you scared of dying? Or for certain patients, I might ask, are you scared of living? Though as a disclaimer, I wouldn't ask this question to just anyone. Since they're pretty deep questions, I would only ask if I'm fairly confident that the other person would want to talk about this. And I've also increased my frequency in which I speak with strangers and listen to different perspectives. Just last week, I spent an hour with a man from the Philippines at a coffee shop. He told me about his life as a police in the Philippines and how he married a woman whose ex-husband was murdered in a case that he was following, and then how she became kind of hostile here in America, and now they're filing a divorce, but then he has various health issues and no income source. So when the opportunity showed, we talked about life and death, and he said that he was very satisfied, even though he has all these health conditions and family problems, that he feels very fortunate to have lived this long. And it's a cool moment to connect with a stranger that deeply in such a short time. Those moments really make me feel fulfilled, and I had a sense that if I were to die that moment, I probably wouldn't have much regret in life. Looking back, I would have lived the day the exact same way I lived. That's a huge relief and really brings me at peace. My morning meditations and nightly reflective journaling has become very regular recently, and that's also helped build on top of these diverse interactions that I continue to have. I noticed that I am much more at peace right now than I was even like a month ago. I think it has a lot to do with just really knowing what I value. Like every single personality test I've taken, or the Myers-Briggs Enneagram, all of it points to me finding fulfillment in seeing others grow, like nurturing others, like an extreme people pleaser basically. So knowing that, I get to live very honestly and without shame or fear of stepping off the path. Like I do this because this really brings me joy. Everything else is secondary to that. Like school, careers, these all matter, but at the forefront, I know my priority lies in connecting with others, whether family or complete strangers, through shared experience or deep conversations, and then flowing with the pool that connection gives me. And I think that showed during my medical school interviews. I was actually taken aback at how relaxed I was. There was this genuine acceptance that whatever happens, it's fine. All I can do is live honestly. And if medicine is the way for me, then some school will accept me, and if not, I will find another path, and that's totally fine as well. I was blunt enough to say in my medical interview that I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a doctor, because that was my honest opinion, that I hadn't had enough experience in medicine to know for certainty. But I was sure that I wanted to become a medical student. And here I am. And speaking of acceptance, I think another thing is just accepting that I will fail, that I will hurt people, I will do harm no matter how good my intentions are, because I am human and I am flawed. And accepting that it's all right to fail, that no matter what other people tell me to do or criticize me, like I'm gonna fail no matter what. Every human will at some point. I think many of us grow up hearing what is the right way to live, either from friends or society or a lot from parents. Like, pursue a career path like this, and have this sort of family, do these things in life, and you are successful. But truly, what is good for you, only you know. And there's really no right or wrong way to live or die, I don't think. I see that a lot, especially in competitive careers, where people are driven not for joy or curiosity, but because of fear of failing or letting someone down. And for those people, I would love to say it's all right. You've done well enough. You are perfect just the way you are. Breathe and enjoy. Let it go. Because only then is there real fulfillment and peace. There's no happy ever after. I never believed in that. Like Cinderella and the Prince, they're gonna have marital issues. Jack with his infinite golden eggs, he's gonna probably discover that wealth isn't necessarily gonna bring fulfillment. Like as long as we're alive, we're gonna keep discovering new challenges and new objectives, and keep convincing ourselves that we are moving forward towards some end, and yet the end is never within reach. Unless we can let go and accept that what we have right this moment is enough to be fulfilled. But that requires a lot of reflection on what we truly value in life, and that might require a lot of going through layers of what we went through in life and how we were raised and how other people have influenced our perspectives, and being able to weed through those and getting to the depth of who we are and why we exist. That perhaps may be the first step to accepting death and being liberated by it. So if anyone tells you that you should live this way or you have to live this way, I would recommend taking those advices with a grain of salt. It's more likely that they themselves have not been able to let go of a fixed narrative on life, and hence fear true failure in living, which for me gives me a great insight into a deeper conversation with that person. But knowing that, it's easier to not get angry or become defensive when others tell you these things. So if you're interested in trying to come to terms with death, which you don't have to at all, I don't know what the heck you want in life, so I'm not gonna tell you to do something. But if you resonated with anything I said, these tips might be helpful. I would recommend exposure, diversifying exposure to experiences, to people, to places, and reflecting on the emotions that you feel. And reflective journaling is more about quality than quantity, at least from my experience. Rather than just simply write like a paragraph every night without giving too much thought, I would rather sit down, and even if it's like just one paragraph a week, if I give a lot of thought into it, it's much more insightful. And in the reflections, my second suggestions would be to try and avoid fixating on a single narrative in terms of, this is the meaning of my life, this is what success is, this is what happens after death, because we don't know. First, identifying our own narratives and identifying where we got these narratives from, then letting them go, I think allows us to better build our own true purpose in life. And it's a difficult thing not to fixate on a single narrative. I'm trying to not fixate on the fact that my purpose in life, I believe, is to connect with people and be there for them, because it might change over time. Once I have my own family, my relationship with death might change, and hence my narrative might change. It's a never-ending journey, but I think being in that state of open-mindedness and searching and curiosity is generally useful for coming to terms with who we are at this moment as the world changes and as our life changes. There are some things we can do to identify these narratives quicker. One is just trying to go fail. Doing something that we've been terrified of doing and we're afraid that the failure is going to cost us so much. For me, that was starting a conversation with a stranger, and you just do it and you'll fail the first few times, but then you realize, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. It's okay to fail. Of course, depends on, I guess, the degree of failure, but another thing is just finding extreme discomfort. For example, last night I was standing outside in this temperature in just my boxers. I've been kind of playing around with the Wim Hof method recently, but that's also one activity you can do to kind of break down your assumptions about to what extent you're capable of tolerating and what kind of discomfort is acceptable. And finally, a rock climbing friend of mine last week shared with me a quote from Malcolm X, in which he wrote about digging his own grave and lying in it, meditating his death, and stepping out of the grave believing that he is already a dead man. And I think that's such a cool experience, and I'm tempted to do that. If I do, I will make a video about that and tell you how it goes. But I think that would be a cool point to reflect on what it feels like to have once died and then feeling like there's nothing more to lose. So I'll leave you guys with one last quote. I promise, last one. This is the first quote on death that I came across in life. Probably when I was like 5 or 6, my mom used to read random Confucius teachings. So this one's from Confucius, and my iffy translation is, if one wakes in the morning and realizes that they are on the right path, there shall be no regret to die that evening. And that's probably the quote that's stuck with me for the longest in my whole life. I try to wake up and I meditate, sometimes read through my vision statement, and make sure that I'm going to live this day in a way that is true to myself, because if I were to die tonight, I wouldn't have lived today any way else. And I'm definitely getting better at it. I wouldn't say I've come to complete terms with my mortality, but I am making progress, and I will continue to work on it. And if you are as well, I wish you the best of luck, and let me know if you have any questions. This is what happens when you let me just make videos for fun. I just ramble on about topics that interest me. But take care, and I'll see you guys again. Bye.